In this class, we will continue with our next topic, that is the adaptation for cross-pollination. So here we'll see for the characters of a set of cross-pollinated flowers. The characters of a cross-pollinated flowers. So the first characters of a cross-pollinated flowers, that is unisexuality. Unisexuality, or which we can say dicliny. Here the flowers, they have only a gynoecium. Or they have only a androecium. So they we can also say that the flowers are usually pistillate or staminate. Example, we can see in a papaya and mulberry. So the next character, it is known as Dichrogami. It means the maturation of the sex organ that is the male and the female gamete at different period of time. That is, they got mature at different timing. So example are cotton, okra, which is the lady finger, so there are two types of this dichogamy, which is number one is the protogynous. The protogynous means the female sex organ they mature first. That means in a cross-pollinated flower where the gynoecium, they got mature before the androecium. So that is basically a characters which are fit only for cross-pollination. And then number B is Protandrous. The androecium, that is the male sex organ, mature first. That is a cross-pollinated flowers in which the male sex organ, they got mature before the female sex organ. So example of protogynous is cotton. Example of Protandrous is mirabilis, jalpa. So the next character, it is heterostyly. heterostyly, here it means cross-pollinated flowers, a flower which have different length of style. Different length of style. Example, evening primrose, and oxalis. In evening primrose, there are two types of flower. Number one, we'll draw here. This is the gynoecium. Here, the androecium is short. Here, the androecium is short. This is one type of flower in evening primrose, and another type is the gynoecium is short, but the androecium is long. So, two types of flower. The one in which the androecium is short and the gynoecium is long is known as the pin flower. And the one in which the gynoecium is short and the androecium is long is known as the trump flower. In oxalis, there are three types. The pin, the trump, and the normal. The next character is known as the pre-potency. Pre-potency is when a gynoecium of a flower, they prefer the pollen of another flower first than the pollen from its own anther. Suppose this is the gynoecium, and this is the pollen of the same flower, and this is the pollen of another flower. So the pollen from another flower, pre-potency, it means pollen from another flower germinate first. So if no pollen from another flower comes, if no pollen from another flower comes, then the pollen from the same flower will germinate. This is known as pre-potency. The next one, that is number 5, is incompatibility. Here it means the from the same flower pollen from the same flower will not germinate. Will not germinate. Here there are no preference. Example of self-compatibility we can find in potato, in tobacco, and then the next one is suppression. Suppression here means the flowers should be a bisexual flower sexual flower, but that means both the male and the female sex organ should present. So here if one sex organ mature, suppose if the male one sex organ mature, the other one become non-functional. Suppose if a female become mature, then the male they become non-functional. And the last thing is hercogamy. Hercogamy, it means there's in flowers that has physical barriers between the pollen and the stigma. We can see in calotropes the pollens are present inside a sac-like structure. So if they land on a stigma, there is a physical barrier. So for this, there should be an agent or a pollinators which can carry this pollen grain and then put in another stigma of another flower. So we can find this in calotropes. So that's all for the adaptations of a cross-pollination flower. There's one fact for cross-pollination. In a cross-pollination, there are variation, hybrids of plant, species occur. Because if a flower from one species got a pollen from another species, if they undergo fertilization, they will come up with a new flower, a new species with new characters and new traits. So that is all for the adaptation of cross pollination.